Good morning, everybody. And today we'll be providing the applicant briefing for the Public Assistance Program. My name is Graham Giles. I'll provide this portion of the brief. After I'm done, Steve will provide some information on hazard mitigation information. You're going to receive a lot of information right now, and it may be a little much. So this is just an overview. This isn't going to go into detail. If you have questions, by all means, put them in the chat, and one of our folks will respond if possible, or we'll follow up with you afterwards. Otherwise, we've got our email address there and our website, which will give you a lot more information. The basic goal today is just to give you an overview of the program. Again, the program is complex, so we are here to help, and we will provide aid throughout this process. But we're going to go over some of the program as a whole, some processes and key requirements, and how to apply for the program. We are addressing two disasters today. DR 4784 was the May incident, which has a deadline to apply of August 30th, and DR 4796, which is the June flooding that is continuing. Currently, the deadline to apply is September 6th. Anybody in the yellow or pink counties that are highlighted may apply for public assistance. Individual assistance is only available in Greene County and for DR 4796. Individual assistance is a different program, so we are only going to address the public assistance portion of this program, or FEMA's program. One of the key things people always want to know about is money. FEMA is a cost share program. FEMA typically provides 75%. The state provides 10% share, which leaves you, the applicant, to cover the remaining 15%. For flood events, the state share is contingent upon the county, city participating in the National Flood Insurance Program. If the county or city does not participate, then you would have to cover the full 25% non-federal share. The first step in the PA process is to submit a request for public assistance, commonly referred to as RPA. For those of you familiar with other grant programs, this is like a notice of interest. Here in Iowa, we ask you to submit your RPA through the state's grant system, EM Grants Pro. If you are new to the system, you will have to register first as a user. On our website, you'll find directions on how to do that. Some things you want to prepare in order to submit this RPA is you'll need the legal name of the entity, the UEI, the FEIN number. You also need to identify who the primary and alternate POCs are going to be, as well as who would be an authorized contact, the person that has signature authority when it comes to legal documents. For private nonprofits, you will be asked to provide additional documentation such as IRS rulings For those of you not sure if you have enough damages to qualify, submit your application. We can always sort it out later. So don't delay, just submit. One of the first things after you submit your RPA will ask to do is the funding agreement. Again, we need to identify those POCs, especially the authorized rep, the person with the signature authority. Typically, this can be a mayor, a county commissioner, city manager. You will get an email from one of the Homeland Security personnel about completing this after you've submitted your RPA. You'll also need to have a UEI. This replaced the DUNS number a couple of years back. If you don't have a UEI, you can go to sam.gov and request one. It will ask you to register, but you don't need to go through the full registration in order to get the UEI. Again, when we reach out regarding the funding agreement, if this is a requirement, we can provide you more details on how to do this. Some of the key references and resources that you need to be aware of: the Stafford Act and the 2 CFR and 4 CFR are the legal documents that help administer this program. Those are condensed down into a more readable version in the Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide, commonly referred to as the PAPA-G. Version 4 is the one you want to be careful. So if you just Google PAPA-G, there is a couple of older versions out there. The one that refer as valid for this disaster is version 4. On our website, you will find some information as well, which may be of value. You will end up using 2 different grant programs. EM Grants Pro is the state's program. You will initially apply through EM Grants Pro, and then as you develop projects, you will work in Grants Portal, and then we will come back to EM Grants Pro to do monitoring activities, closeout activities, and other things. The final reference on there is the PDAP. The PDAP procurement stuff is always problematic, and we'll address this again in more detail later. The first thing that happens after when your RPA is submitted is that FEMA looks at you as an applicant to determine if you're eligible. Then we look at the facilities you're claiming, the work that's going to be done to those facilities, and then we look at the costs. And we're going to address each one of those in a little bit more detail. Applicants must be a state, territory, tribe, local government, or a private nonprofit. Only certain private nonprofits are eligible. To be eligible, you must own and operate a facility that provides an eligible service. There is a lot of these, so I'm not going to go through them all. If you look in PAPA-G, Chapter 3, there is more details on what PNPs are eligible and the services they need to provide. Once you as an applicant approved, then we start to evaluate the facilities that you are claiming. A facility is kind of a broad term here. It can be a building, it can be a piece of equipment, it can be a system. For example, a water distribution system, mechanical, electrical, plumbing stuff that are already part of a building would be considered part of that building as a facility, not separate entities. To be eligible, a facility must have sustained damage as a direct result of the disaster, be located within the declared area, and be the legal responsibility of you, the applicant. Additional guidance on facility eligibility, again, is in the Papa G, Chapter 4. Next, we look at the work that you're doing to those facilities, and this can be broken out into different categories. Two main groups, emergency work and permanent work. Again, it must be a result of the declared incident located within the declared area and be the legal responsibility of you, the applicant. Emergency work typically has to be completed within 6 months of the declaration date, permanent work within 18 months. There is time extension process should that be needed, and your state rep will help you navigate that. Additional guidance on all of these categories of work can be found in the Papa G, Chapter 7 and 8. We're going to look at emergency work a little closer, category A and B. Emergency work is only eligible if the work addresses an immediate threat. Defined as an immediate threat of imminent danger, additional damage or destruction that could reasonably expected to occur shortly thereafter. Category A is for the removal of debris. Again, the deadline is 6 months to complete the work. There is a time extension process if needed. Debris includes, but is not limited to, vegetation debris, trees, bushes, construction and demolition debris, sand, mud, silt, gravel, white goods such as appliances and household items, vehicles and vessels. In order to validate these, be prepared to provide an estimation of the quantity of debris, the location of the debris, where it was collected from. If you used a temporary site to store the debris before disposal, those temporary sites may require a permit from the DNR or other agencies. More on that later. Again, additional guidance can be found in the Papa G, Chapter 7. If you have debris removal needs in your community, it is really important to take a closer look at the specific requirements, eligible criteria, and documentation needed outlined in the Papa G. For example, grinding or removing a tree stump is only eligible if 50% or more of the root ball is exposed. Or if you hire contractors to remove debris, you may need to hire a monitoring company. Category B is for emergency protective measures such as search and rescue, sandbagging, pumping. The deadline to complete Category B emergency work is 6 months. Again, there is a time extension process if needed. Additional guidance on Category B work and the requirements can be found in the Papa G, Chapter 7. Permanent work, categories C through G, is required to restore a facility to pre-disaster design and function. Emergency work to stabilize or eliminate and lessen the immediate threat would be considered emergency work. All permanent work is subject to eligibility of the facility. So if you refer back to the original pyramid, facility as it was originally constructed or modified. It does not mean the capacity at which the facility is being used at the time of the incident. Pre-disaster function is the function for which the facility was originally designed or modified. For example, if you have designed and constructed an administrative building, but then later altered the building to be used as a school using the appropriate codes and standards, FEMA will then view the building as a school. However, if the building was not formally altered, updated regarding codes and standards to function as a school, then FEMA will treat the building as an administrative building. It may look at it as a school if the costs are less. This can all get a bit complex. So again, rely on your state rep to help you navigate the ins and outs. Additional guidance can be found in the Papa G, Chapter 8. Finally, FEMA looks at the cost. Is the cost directly tied to the eligible work? Are the costs adequately documented? Are they necessary and reasonable? Costs must comply with the uniform guidance and cost principles located in 2 CFR Part 200. Eligible costs include labor, equipment, materials, contract work, as well as direct and indirect administrative costs. We'll look at these each in a bit more detail. You should be prepared to provide documentation to support these costs, including invoices, receipts, proof of payments, copies of contracts, timesheets, etc. Again, additional guidance can be found in the Papa G, Chapter 6. FEMA refers to the applicant's own personnel as force accounts, labor. FEMA reimburses force account labor on actual hourly rates plus the employee's fringe benefit costs, insurance, healthcare, and the like. FEMA's criteria for reimbursing straight time labor differs depending on the type of employee and whether it was emergency work or permanent work. Typically, for permanent work, both straight time and overtime labor costs are eligible. For Category B work, generally only overtime is eligible for budgeted employees. Unbudgeted employees, such as temporary hires, then the straight time and overtime may be eligible. For emergency work Category A debris, typically both overtime and regular time are allowed. Labor costs generally have to be supported with documentation. You need to show all the hours the employee worked. So if somebody did a normal duty for an hour in the morning and then went on to do debris work for the rest of the day, you'd need to show that. Again, additional guidance can be found in the Papa G, Chapter 6. FEMA provides funding for the use of your own equipment, known as force account equipment, based on an hourly rate. If you do not have sufficient equipment to effectively respond to an event, FEMA may provide funding for both the purchase and the operation of the equipment. It is important to note that if you purchase the equipment, disposition rules will apply. So when the event is over and the equipment is no longer needed for the disaster, FEMA may reduce the eligibility of that cost based on the fair market value of the equipment. FEMA publishes a national equipment rate based on all costs associated with the operation and ownership, except labor. This includes depreciation, maintenance, etc. If you are not going to use the FEMA rates, you may have to provide justification and documentation to support your own local rates. Leased equipment is eligible. PA funding is then considered based on the terms of the lease. You may need to demonstrate that leasing the equipment was more cost-effective than the purchase of the equipment. Additional information, again, can be found in the Papa G Chapter 6. As I noted earlier, procurement is one of those things that can get a little prickly at times. Like everything else, documentation is key. Non-compliance to procurement rules can potentially jeopardize your funding. It is extremely important you take the time to review your written procurement policies and procedures to ensure they do not conflict with federal requirements. Those state applicants on the line, such as the DNR, DOT, must follow the same policies and procedures they would use for procurement with non-federal funds in compliance with 2 CFR, procurement of recovered materials, and ensure that every purchase order and other contracts includes clauses required by 2 CFR. Non-state applicants, counties, cities, and other local entities, PMPs, must use their own written procurement policies that reflect state, local laws. However, your procurement policy must also conform to the federal laws and standards. Procurement policies are outlined in 2 CFR Part 200. There is additional resources and training available on FEMA's website. If you have a conflict between rules, the general guidance is to follow the most restrictive rule. One of the more common things is we're doing this in an emergency. FEMA may reimburse costs conducted under an emergency procured through non-competitive proposal, also known as sole source contracting. Many disaster recovery projects funded under the PA program do not meet FEMA's definition of emergency or exigent circumstances. It is important to document your justification and describe the emergency and exigent circumstance that you are procuring for. An exigency circumstance is defined as the existence of a need to avoid, prevent, or alleviate serious harm, injury, financial or otherwise, to the applicant. An emergency is defined as the existence of threat to life, public health, safety, or to improve property requiring immediate action to alleviate a threat. Our first scenario, severe weather impacts a city and causes widespread catastrophic damage, including the loss of life, widespread flooding, loss of power, damage to public and private structures, and millions in cubic yards of debris across the city, leaving most of the entire jurisdiction inaccessible. The city needs to provide debris removal activities immediately to restore the access to the community, support services, rescue operations, power restoration, etc., to address health and safety concerns. Under these circumstances, the city may find it necessary to award non-competitive contracts due to the emergency situation to address the threats to life, property, and public health. In the second scenario, a tornado impacts a city in June and causes widespread damage, including to the city school. The city may want to repair the school by the beginning of the school year. Awarding a contract using a sealed bid process can be quite lengthy, and it would extend the contracting beyond the start of the school year. Rather than going through the sealed bid process, in compliance with state and local laws, the city may want to sole source with a contractor that they have previously worked with. Here, the city can demonstrate that there is an exigent circumstance because use of the sealed building process would cause unacceptable delays, affecting the children's education and the city's economy if parents must stay at home with children. E&E contracts should be temporary. Once the emergency or exigent situation has been resolved, FEMA expects applicants to then competitively bid and procure the remaining of the work. It is extremely important to note that procurement missteps can jeopardize your funding. If you are unsure of a situation that meets the definition of emergency or exigent circumstances, we encourage you to reach out to your FEMA and state representatives for guidance. FEMA is legally prohibited from duplicating benefits from other sources. If an applicant receives funding from another source, such as an insurance payment, for the same work, FEMA reduces the eligible cost of the project to prevent duplication of benefits. FEMA will reduce eligible project costs for facilities that are insured by either the actual insurance proceeds or an anticipated insurance proceeds based on your insurance policy. If an insured facility was damaged by flooding and is located within the special flood hazard area, FEMA will reduce the eligible amount by the maximum amount of the insurance proceeds that could have been obtained from the standard National Flood Insurance Program policy, or the value of the facility, whichever is less. If permanent work projects, FEMA will require you to obtain and maintain insurance to protect against those facilities. This is not required for facilities that receive less than $5,000 in damage. Again, additional guidance can be found in the Papa G Chapter 6. Administrative costs or management costs are referred to as Category Z. This is different from project management activities for an individual project, such as construction oversight and monitoring contract work. This is to provide funds for you to recover costs that the time it took to manage these grants. Some of the things that are eligible would be this meeting, participation in site inspections, gathering documentations. These costs are limited, capped up to 5% of your other projects that were awarded. The key here is to start tracking the time that you do use to administer the grant now. It will be needed down the road. So how does this all work? The general life cycle of the PA program is organized into phases. After the presidential declaration, the state coordinates the applicant this briefing. Typically within 30 days of the declaration, interested applicants must submit their RPA, request for assistance, in HSMD's grant system, EM Grants Pro. In this case, both disaster DR 4784 and DR 4796 have received time extensions to submit RPAs. The state and FEMA will review the RPA to confirm the organization's eligibility. Once the RPA is approved, your organization has been termed to be eligible. HSEMD will reach out to coordinate the funding agreement and pre-award risk assessment. Our staff will work with you applicants to review the agency's capacity policies and procedures, including reviewing written procurement policies to ensure their compliance with federal requirements. The results of the risk assessment inform the need for monitoring activities during the disaster. At this time, HSEMD also initiates the funding agreement, which is completed in the state's EM Grants Pro system. No federal funds can be obligated until the funding agreement is completed. Agreements are all electronically signed in the state's EM Grants Pro system. Overall, our intent is to always have staff members available to support and guide you throughout the process. Our field delivery team will provide one-on-one contact from the RPA to obligation. The grants management and monitoring team will provide one-on-one contact to support the obligation to close out of projects. Applicants are also assigned a program delivery manager from FEMA. Your PDMG, as it's commonly referred to, will reach out shortly after the RPAs are being approved to coordinate an exploratory call. This is to gain an understanding of the impacts and discuss requirements and next steps. It's typically 1 to 2 weeks after you've submitted your RPA. At the exploratory call, the PDMG will also coordinate the recovery scoping meeting with you. At this meeting, you should ensure staff with knowledge of the incidents, related damages, emergency work performed, etc., participate in the meeting. Applicants must identify and report all incident-related impacts to FEMA within 60 days of the recovery scoping meeting. To do this, you'll be asked to prepare and submit a damage inventory. As you and the PDMG formulate projects, information is entered and uploaded into FEMA's grants portal system. FEMA gathers project-specific information, conducts site inspections if required, and requests documentation. Damage information is the foundation of all the projects that are awarded. This information is then used to scope the project and costs that are tied to eligible damages. Throughout the process, you will have the opportunity to agree to the damages, the descriptions and dimensions, the project scope and costs. Documentation is required once the final reviews are completed and projects are obligated. All project formulation occurs within FEMA's grants portal system. Projects are paid out depending on the size of the project. The state share is not typically paid out until the projects have been closed. The PDMG, once the projects are all obligated, will coordinate a recovery scoping meeting. This meeting transitions you from FEMA to HSAMD, and we go into the sub-award management phases, ensuring that the projects continue and are closed out appropriately. If needed, amendments and time extensions can be requested via HSAMD. Work with your state rep if you have questions. So again, the first step is to submit your request for public assistance. Once approved, you'll be contacted by HSAMD state rep to complete a funding agreement and pre-award risk assessment. You will also be contacted by your FEMA PDMG to schedule the exploratory call. One of the first things they will ask you to do is then complete the damage inventory. The damage inventory lays out the foundation for all future actions, including project formulation, establishing the damage descriptions and dimensions, the scope of work, and cost estimates. Your PDMG should provide you a damage inventory spreadsheet, but you can also download this from Grants Portal. Between the exploratory call and the recovery scoping meeting, create a rough draft of the damage inventory. At the recovery scoping meeting, we'll use the damage inventory to start grouping and formalizing projects. Again, there is a 60-day window that goes into effect at the recovery scoping meeting to finalize those damage inventories. FEMA has automated some of the project formulation processes for Category A work and Category B work. Your PDMG and state rep can help you through the streamlined application process for Category A debris and Category B emergency work projects. PDMG will work with you to identify sites and facilities that can be combined into a single project. Generally, things are organized based on categories of work and the type of facilities. A project worksheet or PW is created for each project. This captures related disaster damages, facilities that damage, the scope of work, and costs. In order for projects to be written, the minimum threshold is $3,900 in eligible costs. FEMA administrators funding for large and small projects differently. The threshold between large and small is $1,037,000. For funds, the funds for these projects handled differently. Small projects, for example, if you have a road repair that is estimated to cost $500,000, but ends up costing you $600,000, then you will only receive the $500,000. However, if you spend less, you still get the $500,000. Therefore, when costing projects that fall under the $1 million threshold, it is recommended that you be carefully with estimating these costs. Large projects over $1 million are paid out based on actual related costs. For example, if a project is estimated to cost $1.2 2 million, but the final costs end up being 1.4. The project can be paid out at 1.4 million with appropriate documentation. Here in Iowa, small projects, the federal share is paid on obligation. The state share is paid out after the project is closed. Large projects, the federal share becomes available at obligation, but must be requested throughout the project in the state's EM Grants Pro system. FEMA is always looking to reduce and eliminate risks. The 406 hazard mitigation can help you do that. Here, the FEMA is looking to build back better. As you identify your damages on the damage inventory, note which damages could be strengthened. Your FEMA PDMG and your HSEMD state representative will discuss the potential of hazard mitigation with you and work with you through the process. Additional information on 406 program can be found in Chapter 8 of the PAPA-G. If a mitigation activity does not meet the criteria for PA funding, there are other programs available, and more on this later. FEMA reviews projects to ensure compliance with environmental and historic preservation requirements. FEMA publishes a green sheet that will provide disaster related guidance. We should post a copy on our website. HSMD also requires applicants to review FEMA special consideration questions on FEMA form 009-0-12. This form is completed for each PA project and can assist applicants with identifying items related to the projects that may require additional EHP review by FEMA. In some cases, permits are needed, especially if projects are near waterways or within floodplains. You may be required to submit applications for permits to both the DNR and the Army Corps. For those that have been involved in the program before, this used to be a joint application, but now you have to apply to each agency separately. Additional information about the applications and the processes can be found on their websites. FEMA, if they determine your project is near a waterway or within a floodplain, will require a response from the appropriate agencies, either a positive response or a negative response. If you choose, you may want to improve a damaged facility that an improvement that is not required by codes and standards. A project that is restored to pre-disaster function of the facility and incorporates improvements or changes to the pre-disaster design is an improved project. Alternative projects, the applicant may determine that public welfare is not best served by restoring the facility that was damaged. When this occurs, the applicant must obtain FEMA's approval to apply PA funding towards a different facility or facilities. FEMA refers to this as alternate projects. For example, instead of repairing an old warehouse, you may choose to put those funds towards buying a new fire truck. Again, the Papa G Chapter 8 has additional guidance. There is also an alternative procedures for permanent work under Section 428 of the Stafford Act, which is designed to achieve better recovery outcomes and simplify delivery of assistance. FEMA caps federal funding based on an aggregate federal share of the approved estimate costs to restore the damaged facility to pre-disaster design and function, and for costs effective PA mitigation measures associated with actual restoration scope of work that the applicant may perform. FEMA will complete a fixed cost estimate for all large permanent work projects and will send that fixed cost offer to applicants for consideration. If an applicant accepts FEMA's consideration, then it is considered an alternate procedures project. If the offer is not accepted, the project will continue down the traditional process paths. Additional information can be found in Chapter 8 of the Papa G. So far in Iowa, HSAMD has not found the alternative procedures of accepting a fixed cost offer beneficial to applicants and feels that the benefits can be achieved by going through the standard processes. FEMA funding is aimed at restoring facilities based on pre-disaster design and function and conforms with current applicable codes and standards. Codes and standards need to be implemented even if they are more stringent than local codes. The purpose is to promote resiliency and reduce future risk in repairing and replacing damaged facilities. The FEMA policy listed there outlines the framework and requirements. FEMA also offers a building science library that may be benefit depending on certain types of buildings you're wanting to repair. Additional guidance can be found in the Papa G Chapter 8. So the PA program is a partnership between FEMA, HSAMD, the state, and you, the applicant. As a federal awarding agency, FEMA provides the primary responsibility to develop and issue program guidance, award the primary disaster grant to the state, and assist in the development and final approval of projects and obligate funds. The state is the recipient of the primary grant. As a pass-through entity, HSAMD works in partnership with FEMA to manage and administer the program in Iowa. HSAMD has a dedicated team of staff. Our staff supports the administration of subawards, provides technical assistance, and monitors project progress and completion. FEMA uses the term applicant and subrecipient to identify you as a local partner. Applicant is you typically referred to as applicant when you apply, Once you receive funds, you're referred to as a subrecipient. Documentation is required to be retained for at least 3 years from the day your account for this disaster is closed. We recommend you organize your documentation as if you are going to be audited. You'll want to establish a disaster-specific file to maintain documentation for each of your PA projects and include all supporting documentation for the project's costs claimed. For those of you that receive over $750,000 in federal funds, this comes from any federal entity, not just FEMA, you will be required to complete a single audit. Common findings are typically missing or incomplete documentation, ineligible or unreasonable costs, procurement issues, and funds that were commingled and not tracked separately in your accounting systems. Okay, so first step, apply. This is the third time you've seen this slide now. So hopefully I've made that clear that the first step is to submit your request for public assistance. From there on, we can reach out and help you through the process. As we mentioned throughout the briefing, there's a lot of resources available to you. The most important resource you have is your state rep and your FEMA PDMG. There are some additional programs that are available to applicants. HGMP, my co-part Steve will provide more details on this after I'm done. There is also FEMA offers a community disaster loan, which is available to local governments affected by the major disasters. These funds can be used to carry on providing essential services or to expand services to meet disaster-related needs. The loans initial terms are for 5 years, but can be extended up to 10 years. The state of Iowa has a contingency fund as well. It is designed to meet disaster-related necessary expenses or serious needs through a loan. Funds cannot exceed $1 million per fiscal year. There is a 20-year repayment schedule with no interest. These funds are administered by HSEMD. The Small Business Administration provides low-interest disaster loans to help businesses and homeowners recover from declared disasters. Details can be found on their website. Through the CDBG Disaster Recovery Program, HUD provides its grants to help cities and counties, states recover from declared disasters. The Iowa Economic Development Authority has the authority to manage this grant for the state of Iowa. U.S. Department of Labor provides a National Dislocated Worker Grant to provide funding to create temporary employment opportunities to assist with cleanup and recovery efforts. Iowa Workforce Development is the agency for the state that manages these funds. The Federal Highway Administration also has an emergency relief program for communities that are affected by disasters to repair damages to roads and bridges. These generally focus on interstate, freeways, and major collector roads. The Iowa Department of Transportation is the agency that manages this for the state. Finally, the Farm Service Agency offers a variety of programs to help farmers and communities, businesses that have been hit by natural disasters. Programs include livestock assistance, farm loans, farmland damage, and crop assistance. More can be found on their website. This concludes my portion of the brief. I will be followed by Steve, who will provide more information on hazard mitigation. If you have questions, please, again, reach out to the email listed or your state rep. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Reckling, the HMA Programs Manager. I have about 18 slides covering the Hazard Mitigation Assistance Program, but I promise to keep everything short. But most importantly, please reach out to us to schedule a meeting to discuss further, and our contact is on the last slide. So let's briefly cover, like Graham mentioned, the public assistance or 406 mitigation, the hazardous mitigation grant program, flood mitigation assistance, building resilient infrastructure in communities, and our building code adoption and enforcement funding. So FEMA's hazardous mitigation assistance provides funding for eligible mitigation measures that reduce future disaster losses and is really any sustainable action that reduces or eliminates long-term risks to people and property from future disasters. As Graham mentioned, although PA mitigation is not eligible for category A and B work, it is a key element in building resiliency. So please keep in mind, if permanent work gets declared, that you'll be prepared to present a couple of ideas for mitigation. And again, there's a lot of stuff in this slide, and same with a couple other slides, but these will all be provided to the attendees, and you could read at your leisure or ask any questions as well. So these are the HMA programs that we manage. The Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, which is available after a major disaster declaration to provide funding for infrastructure projects. There's another slide with some eligible project types. A few are mentioned here. Capability and capacity building. So if there's planning work that a community is interested in, project scoping, advanced assistance, some kind of studies related to a mitigation project that you might be thinking about in the future. And then the actual implementation of the application development for the full HMGP grant application is also eligible. Then there's flood mitigation assistance. It's an annual competitive program. And then the BRIC program as well, annual competitive, and our building code and enforcement funding. So here, so what are we mitigating against the FEMA lifelines? On the bottom, you can see the safety and security, food, hydration, shelter, health and medical, water systems, energy, communications, transportation, hazardous materials. These are kind of like the major lifelines when we think about mitigating mitigative actions. And if you just zoom into one of them, for example, the energy lifeline. So if we're going to mitigate here, would it be the grid or fuel? If it's the grid, then you can go deeper down and consider generation, transmission, or distribution. And you could kind of do this for each one of those lifelines. And a few highlights of the program. HSCMD is a conduit for applications and funding to and from FEMA. The communities are the conduit for applications and funding to and from the homeowners and citizens. Best practice is to contact HSCMD Mitigation Bureau prior to posting and soliciting documents and entering into any agreements. There's a few other tips over there on the side. Post-award agreements and work cannot begin until FEMA approves the application. So just keep in mind, don't purchase materials or equipment begin construction, or any type of work activities that relate to the HMA programs. Planning requirements, there's a few here. Most importantly, the local jurisdictions are required to have a FEMA approved local hazard mitigation plan in order to be eligible for HMA. So we're halfway through already. So this is the biggest thing I think for the audience here would be the Hazardous Mitigation Grant Program, HMGP, provides funding when a president declares a major disaster, or it's available to state, tribal, local governments, certain nonprofits, for any measure, project, or action proposed to reduce the risk of future damages, hardship, loss, or suffering from disasters. Then the typical cost share on the bottom is 75% federal, 15% local, and 10% state. The eligible mitigation activities, obviously there's other possibilities. Here's a list of several: property acquisition, structure elevation, localized flood risk reduction, secondary power source, maybe it's a generator, hardening or undergrounding electrical systems, warning systems like tornado sirens, and then tornado safe rooms. HMGP ranking and selection, complete proposals evaluated are evaluated using the prioritization criteria, which is primarily from the state hazard mitigation plan. Again, we can help determine if the project is best suited for HMGP or PA mitigation. This slide kind of shows the overall timeline of events. It's not a super fast process. Generally, the first 12 months after the declaration, submit a notice of interest, develop the application, and submit the application for FEMA's review and approval. And then the following 36 months or so is for the completion of the scope of work and close out to FEMA. And one thing to keep in mind is there is a limited amount of funding under HMGP, and it is available statewide. The Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities, or BRIC, it's an annual program that supports communities as they implement hazard mitigation projects to reduce the risk from future disasters. The project eligibility is very similar to HMGP, sort of shovel-ready projects or phased infrastructure projects. And again, the same sort of scoping activities are also available under BRIC for planning or application development. And just to mention, the city of Coralville was selected for a $20 million BRIC application in 2022, and Denison Municipal Utility was selected for a $12 million BRIC application in 2023. We're currently working on BRIC 2024 applications and looking for additional projects. Flood mitigation assistance annual program that makes federal funds available nationally to reduce or eliminate the risk of repetitive flood damage to buildings and structures insured under the National Flood Insurance Program. Communities must be participating in an NFIP. Please reach out to us for BRIC, HMGP, FMA for additional information. The building code adoption and enforcement, it's a really big initiative from FEMA, very important obviously for the community's resiliency. The scope of work of this particular grant is defined with an aim at supporting communities seeking to update or adopt their current codes to the most current additions to improve their implementation, to build more resilient communities. And furthermore, communities implementing current codes can bolster their competitiveness for the bulk of hundreds of millions in competitive FEMA BRIC funding. This slide, very busy here. If you're interested later, all these slides will be provided, but the information on this slide is very useful and easy to read. It covers on the left the HMA programs, and then the eligible projects under each program, and then it shows the various cost shares based on the program. Flew right through there. Like I mentioned earlier, most importantly, please reach out to us with for additional information, coordinate an introductory meeting, and discuss any potential project types. We could cover a lot of stuff in under 30 minutes or we could go as long as an hour or 2 hours if you like, but please reach out to us with questions on the mitigation programs. We're very excited to begin working on new applications all the time. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Graham. So that ends our applicant briefing. Just as a reminder, even though Graham mentioned it numerous times, most importantly is to meet our request for public assistance deadline for both events, and everything will be emailed out to all participants and EMAs after this. I'll hold on for a couple minutes if anybody has questions. Otherwise, thank you for your time.